if your culture strategy is not aligned to driving the business results,
it's dead on arrival.
So you need every HR professional needs to make sure that they align that cultural direction to help it actually achieve the business results.
Before you go into any company, you have a career plan, your goals, what you want to achieve. Getting into an organization, you shouldn't dump that plan. Hello everyone, welcome back to HRT. My name is Taye, your host. Today we'll be talking about a topic that is very, very important, especially now that connectivity and inclusivity is very vital. We'll be talking about crafting culture of inclusion. Joining me on the show today is our very own Innocent. Innocent, thank you for honoring us again. I must say that the last time you were on the show, we got very good feedback on the different points that you had dropped. And there were quite a number of learnings from the discussions that we had. So thank you so much for, coming back on the show. I know that, it's going to be a very explosive one today, especially because culture is one of your areas of expertise, correct?
Yeah.
All right. So, Innocent, just for the benefit of those who may have missed out on the previous episode that you were on, could you just let's meet you?
Okay. Thank you very much, Tai, for having me once again. It was an exciting time we had the last time we were here.
Absolutely.
And I'm also excited that was able to impact a couple of people. Again, my name is Innocent, HR practitioner for about 17 years now. Always very, very fascinated about HR topics, and the topic we have to discuss today, culture. Culture, very, very interesting topic, but at the same time, it's a very controversial topic for HR professionals. So I'm more than happy for us to discuss and share some thoughts around it, especially my own thoughts around it.
Yeah, I can confirm that you're fascinated about the topic HR, anything HR, because having you for a second time on the channel for another discussion around another HR topic out of your busy schedule, I could tell. With the experiences I've even had with you and also your commitment to joining us to educate and inspire people on HR matters, shows me and tells me that you're fascinated about it. So we'll just go right into it. Talking about crafting culture of belonging. What exactly is your perspective on that? Okay.
First of all, let's first understand the word belonging. What does belonging even mean in the first place? Right. So most organizations today are talking about culture, but there are different things that actually sums up to that word called culture. Right. But again, let's focus on maybe the word belonging. For someone to feel belonged has the connotation which is linked to someone being needed in a way. Right. And then when you bring that into the context of the environment or the workplace, right, it's how do organizations literally intentionally create experiences within the workplace that drives, number one, for me, psychological safety. 2, that gives people the feeling of being involved. And then number 3, that gives people the feeling of being valued. For me, these 3 key perspectives is what, for me, sums up that culture of belonging in any organization. When you find yourself working in an organization that doesn't appreciate every little effort that you bring to bear, knowing fully well that, yes, our relationship is always contractual. Yeah, you sign a contract, I sign a contract. Yes, and so what? But then it beckons on the organization to ensure that beyond the contract, the black and white paper that we sign, there are individuals that need to exist and understand the context of why a thriving culture, a sustainable culture would definitely impact the business positively. So for me to feel belonged personally, I need to feel that I'm safe to say anything. I'm safe to bring my contributions to be on the organization. I'm safe to suggest wild ideas. I'm safe to innovate. I'm safe to give feedback, right, in an open manner, or my line manager wouldn't be vindictive of myself. You understand? So for me, making sure that an organization recognizes that psychological safety is important, people feel valued for every contribution they bring to bear on the organization. And then people are involved. Talk about inclusion. If I don't feel that I am included in an organization, then it has a way of actually impacting me in one way or the other. So for me, this is what I think we as HR practitioners and even organizations need to focus on when you think about asking that question or trying to answer the question of, okay, is this organization very, very well-being driven? Because again, belonging links back to well-being. So for me, that's what it means.
Thank you so much, Innocent, for that. I think I'll pick on three things that you talked about. You talked about the psychological safety.
Yes.
You also talked about being valued. And the third point about feeling included, right? Yes. So what are the practical tips that you can share with us as an organization or even as a community? What practical tips would you share with us around ensuring psychological safety, ensuring that people feel valued and including people?
Well, I mean, look, first of all, you need to have a manuscript for how you should work in your organization. Why do I call it a manuscript? It's what most organizations would term as their value proposition, right? Their core values. I think for me, the first thing you need to understand is, okay, what are your core values? How do you go about defining your core values? And this is where the entire organization is very, very important, and they play a very solid role in doing that. Most organizations today, when we talk about transformative culture, transformative workplace environment or workplace practices, it comes from how you craft your value system or what your value system is made up of and how people believe or connect with that value system. So for you to create such an environment, you need to have a set of behaviors that defines what the right culture means. And those set of behaviors could be as little as how often you give feedback and how it's received by everybody. It could be as little as how you recognize people within the workplace. It could be as little as how you communicate. It could be as little as how you drive innovation or you make sure that you incite innovation within the organization. So there are different elements that you need to take into perspective when creating that culture of belonging where everybody feels that they are safe, they are valued, and they are included. But you need to first define what your value system are. If I take my organization as an example, you understand, 2023, we set out to rethink about our vision and reimagine our vision as an organization. And when we reimagined our vision, which is the how, we needed to answer the question of the what, right? And the what basically were what behaviors do we expect as an organization for every employee to imbibe to make sure that that vision that we want to aim for, that we are striving towards, is achieved. And we set out to define setting core values. But it goes beyond just defining those core values. You now need to understand, okay, what are the descriptive behaviors that sits beneath those core values? And one of them, basically, which I really love a lot, is the behavior that says, we are free to challenge status quo. And that, for me, closely links to that environment of belonging. So if I'm able to challenge you, and challenging status quo, don't get me wrong, doesn't mean I shut you down. No. It means me being very creative in the way I ask questions. It means me being very intentional and empathetic in the way I hold conversations with you. So those are the little things that drives that particular behavior, which says, we strive to ensure that we have an environment that allows people to challenge status quo. So creating an environment that engineers or fuels that feeling of belonging goes a long way in defining what the behaviors are that you require in the organization for everybody to actually strive towards to. Now, when you do that, the next thing is you have to communicate. How do you communicate it to the entire organization? What is the level of awareness of people around the behaviors? The second element is how is it modeled? Because, we say, yes, culture is everybody's business, but the most fundamental business of leadership in every organization is actually making sure that that culture sticks. Because, people tend to follow what leaders do to a large extent. And so if you, on one hand, have defined certain attributes, certain behaviors that you expect should fuel that element of belonging, but then the leadership is not modeling that behavior, you see that it would be counterproductive. So for me, you need to set what the core behaviors are that people should imbibe, Secondly, you need to get leadership to sponsor it, to drive it, to communicate it, and to model it. Because people need to feel that element of they are connected to the values, and then they themselves would also further connect to it. So for me, these are the core things that you definitely need to do. And then lastly for me is decision making. Because cultures don't exist in isolation. There are certain decisions that are very critical that you need to make when it comes to fueling or defining the right culture in your organization. How you communicate those decisions is also equally important. So they are intertwined in a way. But for me, these are like some key elements that we HR practitioners should always focus on when we want to create that environment of belonging. And don't get me wrong, even in the core practices or the core niches around HR, from talent acquisition all the way to exit, they also, have a very big role to play. Because if you have a defined culture, I remember then in 2018, I was part of a project team that needed to redefine our talent acquisition strategy. I remember one of the things that was very, very, it was a topical issue was, okay, how do we already test culture as part of our hiring process? You understand? And how do we infuse that into the selection process such that even before you join the organization, we almost have an indicative assumption that you would be a culture fit. And so that's where the lingo around culture fit or network fit started to grow. You understand? So yeah, and we did it, and we defined, certain behaviors. We put it into a tool. And so when you apply, the first thing you get hit with is a culture test. And so when you complete the culture test, you get a score. The score gives us an indicative understanding or analysis of your personality, your behavior, your values. And so once we're able to tie that with ours, we feel that, okay, yes, this person is likely to be happy in our kind of environment. So it's very important to build every element of your cultural framework in your entire employee life cycle as well.
Absolutely. Just on an aside, I think people are beginning to try to learn to game the system in terms of that culture test, where they feel they can manipulate things, they can answer in a certain way to make you feel that this is what they are. But that's that's a topic for another day, really. You also touched on something I was going to actually ask about, which is the role of leadership. But you had talked about them being sponsors, right? Being sponsors of the culture, and also doing what they want to see the people do so that the people can see them and also replicate that. But I'm actually very curious about your experiences, and can you share like a success story with us where there was intentionality in the effort to create that culture of belonging?
Yeah, I mean, modeling a culture is one of the major KPIs for any leader. And I always say, as when we talk about measuring impact, one thing is to have that cultural framework. Another thing is how do you measure that is actually impacting the organization? And that's where, leadership comes into play. You understand? When you have leaders in the organization who don't practice what, in quote and unquote, you preach, it poses a huge risk to the business, because it would be like a counterintuitive impact of what you intend to achieve when you define the culture versus what you're even eventually experiencing. If I take my experience on this, so there was a time when we transformed our cultural values, basically our core values that more or less shapes our organization. And some of those values were in a large extent linked to our new ways of working policy. So COVID happened.
Okay.
A lot of organizations and changes within the organization in terms of core practices had this titanic shift of how we see the work environment, and in my kind of organization, hybrid working, remote working was now the new way of working. You understand? But then, even though we wanted that to be the new way of working, we were quite interested in understanding how that will impact both the employees as well as the business. Okay, because people wanted more flexibility. Okay, so we're moving from a very, very structured and fixed kind of work setting to a new way of working arrangement for employees. And that automatically, even though you think it would not have an impact, it automatically has an impact on the culture. Because we're moving from a situation where line managers were used to seeing everybody in the
Everybody.
office every day. So the connections were there, right? And then we're moving to an environment where you wouldn't get to see everybody in the office every day. And the big question was, okay, are we mature enough to actually embrace this new way of working? And how would it impact the culture? Because then if I can see you, I'm able to understand your nuances. I'm able to see them based on body languages, and I'm able to address it immediately. But hey, line managers were forced to start understanding how to manage teams remotely. And you had certain training organizations thinking of how to develop even training models to equip, enable, and build the capability of managing remote teams as well. And that in a way impacted on our culture internally, right? And so easily we started to ask ourselves questions because we saw that from our engagement results, people felt a lot of burnout. And the burnout was because managers were used to seeing that you're doing the job because you're physically in the office. But now they're not used to seeing you in the office. And there's this lack of trust that, how am I sure that this person is working?
Yeah.
Do you understand? So culture, first of all, is built heavily on trust. Now, trust was secured because everybody was in the same location.
Office, yeah.
Now, trust was kind of like questioned because everybody is no longer in the office. So how could we now make sure that line managers started to understand that, look, this is the new way of working. It's here to stay. It's not going to change. And what do we do? And so we started to think about trainings. We started to train our leaders to understand how to manage remote teams. We started to help them develop things like RACI documents in terms of roles and responsibilities. We started to help them understand. We even developed a NWOW. We called it NWOW policy, new way of working policy, to help line managers understand, okay, this is the time. These are the core hours. These are off-core hours. These are meeting hours. So once everybody understands it, everybody's plugged in within that period. And so line managers understand that, look, I need to also respect this person's time outside the workplace.
Absolutely.
So I think it's embedded in how you approach your problem based on your peculiarity. Because again, I can tell you how I solved the problem in mind, but then you now ask me, okay, so what about technology companies where from day one, right, they operate call centers? They are naturally, you understand, how do you also deal with that?
Yeah.
So for me, you need to first understand what the problem is that is peculiar to your organization. And you can do that by setting surveys, setting quick polls, setting one-to-one conversations. And then from there, piece out what is critical and what are the burning issues for employees, and then formulate your ideas around it. We formulated our ideas around what we should do for leaders. And we also formulated our ideas on what we should do for employees. Because while we build certain templates on the RACI, certain templates in terms of trainings and all that, we also put in on the side a sanctions grid to say, if you're not doing this, this is the penalty for this as well. So that people understand that, look, at the end of the day, we are here to make money for the business, right? And we're here to make sure that the business does not suffer, right? And once people were on the same page, people just naturally fall into place.
So just for the purpose of HR enthusiasts, people that are not in the field, I know you've mentioned the RACI metrics a lot, the responsibility, accountability, and all. If you can just touch little on it so that people, I mean, you've mentioned it like 2 times, just so that they know what you're talking about.
I mean, RACI is simply, like you said, who is responsible for what, who is accountable, who should be consulted, who should be involved. Do you understand? When everybody was in the workplace, that wasn't particularly very important because the line manager had the freedom and the flexibility to assign responsibilities to anybody, as long as the job gets done, right? And as long as it's in a controlled environment. Now you're in an environment where it is no longer controlled, right? But the work still needs to be done, but the job still needs to be done. And so the only way we thought that it was possible was to say, okay, look, we now have to define clear delegation of responsibilities, who does what, and then who leads what, who should follow. So who's the leader and who is the follower within the team? So the RACI document was simply a document that helped everybody understand, first of all, who's responsible for what based on their roles and responsibilities, who needs to be involved, who needs to be consulted, and who needs to be informed. And once everybody, so it's like a template. right? So everybody's looking at the same template, right? And everybody understands how to define those deliverables that should come out of it. Another example, or tool that we also started using was virtual tools, right? So you have MS Planner, you have Kanban, and these are like tools that you can use to actually manage teams remotely, right? And that was also something that we felt was important because line managers needed visibility around deliverables. So rather than a situation where a line manager can literally walk up to you or your desk and ask, how are you doing? What about this deliverable? Where are you with it and all that? The line manager, because you're working from home, will just go on the Kanban or on the Microsoft Planner and sees the status of a particular deliverable. And so it helps people to collaborate a lot more. So for us, because we wanted to not lose touch of that element of collaboration, which was a very, very focal element of our culture, and now we needed to embrace work from home and flexi work. We needed to take that collaboration from being physical to being virtual. And so we needed to think about virtual tools to still ensure that collaboration continues to happen. So the RACI on one hand was important, but then the Kanban tools and the technology tools as well were also very important to help line managers get real-time, on-time visibility about everybody's task.
Yeah.
So you're not left blind, even though people are working virtually or there's this flexibility.
Sorry, I'm going to take you back again on something you mentioned about when you guys were designing new way of work.
Yes.
You talked about core hours. You talked about 3 different types of hours. Can you touch on that a bit more?
So again, we're talking about culture here, and then we're talking about how we actually allow or help people embrace the culture that came with the new way of working post-COVID, right? And so for us, it was really sitting with the employees to understand, okay, if you think about where we operate today, which is Lagos, right? Lagos is known as a traffic city. Right? And so the question was, what time do you spend commuting to work, right? We're trying to measure that and commuting from work and to the office place. Now, when you come into the office, what time do you need to focus on work versus focus on meetings? You get. And so we needed to get all those insights. We interviewed a lot of employees, and then based on the outcome of those interviews, those conversations, we now noticed that, look, there were 3 different hours. There was the commute hour, there was the me time hour, and then there were the core hours. So the commute hours were, the time employees spend commuting to and from work. There were the me time hours, which was 8 to 9, which is you come into the office by 8 because contractually your contract is usually by 8. But between 8 to 9, freshen up, have your me time, check on your meals and all that. And then you now have the core hours, which starts from 9 to 3. These are the periods where you now do a lot of collaboration. You have meetings with line managers, people. And then after that, again, the cycle continues.
Yeah.
After 3, you have your me time till 5, which is your contractor hour to now actually do the work. And then by 5, you're off from the work. So it was just to put some structure within the flexibility. Because again, people tend to misuse, flexible, yeah, you do anything. No, there can still be standardization within flexibility. And that's what we're trying to aim at when we define that.
Incredible. So I'm going to take 2 questions in one so that we can wrap up. So I wanted to put a question to you that what are the other benefits of having that culture of belonging? And then maybe you can take it together with your closing statement on this topic.
Yeah, I mean, for me, look, the benefits is sometimes you'd say it's immeasurable on the positive side, from the positive outlook. Businesses exist to make profit, right? Now, people are the drivers of that profit or that growth or that sustainability. Now, culture is actually the connection that people have within a system. Okay. If I don't feel connected to the environment that I come to every day, then it has a way of impacting productivity in one way or the other. And so for me, if organizations are not focusing a lot of their strategies on ensuring that they're fueling and enabling the right culture, it automatically impacts productivity. People are not engaged, and when people are not engaged, the business suffers. So
Absolutely.
For me, in summarizing the topic around culture, there needs to be a lot more intentionality from everybody in the organization. there needs to be a lot more acceptance from employees as well as the leaders. And I call it equal acceptance because for me, it's, say, yeah, leadership drives it, but no, the followers also need to be part of it, right? So there needs to be that level of acceptance. But more importantly for me, there needs to be that structure within it. Structure the expectations of why that culture is important. And then lastly, if your culture strategy is not aligned to driving the business results,
it's dead on arrival.
It's dead on arrival. So you need every HR professional needs to make sure that they align that cultural direction to help it actually achieve the business results. And then you're home and wet, not home and dry.
Thank you very much, Innocent. Incredible insights. Really incredible insight. Thank you so much. To our viewers, thank you for tuning in. Let's remember, driving a culture of belonging starts with each of us. We can all come together to create an environment where we all feel seen, heard, and also valued. So let's all take that as a charge to ensure that we play a vital role, whether you're in HR, whether you're in admin, you're a back-end developer, whatever role that you play in an organization, you also have a role to play regarding creating a culture of belonging where everyone feels, again, seen, heard, and also valued. Once again, thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to click, like, and share the video. Also, like I always say, that we would like to engage with you. We've gotten some topics which we'll be discussing in other episodes, but we also want to engage with you more. So let's know what your thoughts are on the topic that we have just discussed. And let's also know what topics you would also like us to address. So Innocent, as we bring this to a close, what topic would you like us to address on?
Yeah, I think it would be nice to touch on performance management, but not just performance management, from a broad spectrum.
Okay.
And I'm saying this because of, the new trends in the workplace, when you say future of work, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it's really about how can we start to reimagine performance management such that we are focusing more on productivity as against activity. Because for me, again, it goes back to that flexibility of the future of work. People want to be more flexible, but how can you still achieve performance when people want to stay flexible in their work patterns? That for me is a very, very key, because I'd like for us to really delve into that and see how people are managing that, because it's a big issue. People feel that
I totally
once you're working
agree.
from home, productivity will drop, but it's not always the case. So it's how can we change our mindset and reimagine even our performance frameworks, because sometimes it might require that you change your framework.
Absolutely.
You understand? To focus more on, okay, did he achieve? Yes. And then let's not be...
Thank you for that suggestion. We will definitely look into it, because I know there's also something about that performance management where people think it's all about setting goals and doing appraisals. Just setting goals and doing appraisals, So yes, thank you so much for that suggestion. We'll definitely look into performance management. Incredible insights today, Innocent. Thank you so much. Thank you. Incredible insights as always. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.